day in the Rear Studio as part of that process. I mean, one of the things that's come out of it is this exchange between Cinmat and Leon. And so we bear little fruits over time of different kind. And we had a nice conversation about, you know, the changing relationships between composers and what used to be called interpreters, but I think that that's sort of you were saying it's problematic these days in a way. And so the issue of improvisation, of composition, of working with scores, of working with flexibility and discovery, and what is the thread between something like Mikrofony, Stockhausen, and the current moment of exploring physical objects and sound, and how what's different about that in relationship to what you call meeting, which was really like the key, right? Yeah. And so we talked a lot about how just meeting is sort of like becomes the goal, you know, and finding things in the world to touch, but also to translate through your experience, you know. And then when you have a composer and a performer, then it becomes a choreography of these things, you know, of these experiences, not just finding new material, but finding material that brings us to the present. You know, in my case, makes us desire to do something again. So, Jean-Geoffroy, thank you for bringing those things to me today.
So, okay,
we're gonna wait for Jeremy before we officially begin. But if you want to talk a little pre-talk about yourself and your life of experience with who, and that would be great.
No.
Yeah, but if you know something in addition, because I'm still waiting to get the word from Jeremy that.
So
you can go ahead.
Okay.
There you go.
I will present a tool, a dispositive which is called Light Wall System. It's a capture gesture dispositive, and this kind of tool has its own history. It's very important to me, you know, as I said, Ed, that everything is a process. So for this, the tool I will present to you, I will present today. It came from 2004 when I had the chance to play this piece, light music, and this piece will be possible to be created because in 1984. Thierry Demey wrote Ends for Van de Kebus. It's a piece for choreographer, you know, and the choreographer and dancers and composer had the same score, you know. So it's very simple. You have one line for right hand, left hand for left hand, and so on, with typical things related to the position of your hand on your knee at the very start, because it was just a workshop. He worked with Van de Kebus, who ended a very big tour in the world, and he would like to have some more light production to do. And he worked a lot with under sessions movement, you know, with Thierry. And after a moment, Thierry hurt his legs and said, okay, I will take a table, it will be easier for me. And he started to do that. It's just 2 pages, you know. It's 10-15 minutes piece. But what I would like to show you that because he decided immediately to write what he did, you know. And I think it's very, very important because, of course, you have the time of performance, of experimentation, and so on. And after a moment, you have to write because you, of course, you know that it's a punctuation in your job, you know. And then he used the same thing to write a piece for three called Musique de Table, so well known for the percussionist. And immediately he tried to develop his own vocabulary. And this is something you know very well as composer. When you appropriate new possibilities, you are obliged to fix few things. So we see that compares to hands, here it's much more precise, okay, in the position and so on and so on. And after, so I go fast, okay, but we were still in the same position. Of course, when you play on your knees, you're like that, okay, on your table, and even it's a table, it's an interface with the audience, you know. So it was just hands extended, okay, with all lot of things. It's very simple in classical form. You have an introduction. After this one, this is the introduction. After you have some development, and then we have fuga from the last page and so on and so on, and you have a lot of things, but it's very classical. One thing very new, and that's why we are here, is this kind of things, you know. Why? Because he developed a kind of writing, not just eating the table, but over the table. So he starts to work on the kind of specialization, you know. And after a moment, so the piece is like that, and so on. And in in 2002, he wrote a piece. It was a joke first because he worked a lot with Ictus ensemble, which is a very famous Belgian ensemble. And at that time, he plays one piece, and then it was a Stravinsky piece. And he was a bit afraid about the comparison. So he would like to do something joking or something like that to make a transition between. And he asked to Georges Lioctors to write a piece for to play a piece for conductor solo. So he wrote a piece called Silence Must Be, and at that moment the conductor turn his face in front of the audience and play in the silence. And what was a joke at that time became a really important progress in the process of Thierry, because we had horizontal surface, and suddenly the surface is vertical. So it means that for the performer, for the audience, for the dramaticology things, you know, everything concerning the appropriation of the incarnation is absolutely different, because you are directly in contact with people in the audience. And then after that piece, so he used the same things, you know, with this one. So here you have the right hand like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, okay, up, and then 3 behind 1, 2, coting, ticoting, 1, ticoting, ticota, and then here, ticons, cut, tick, ticons, ticot, tick, tick. This kind of writing is very easy to understand, because you have, for example, you will always have 5 right, okay, so it's clear, and here it's like that, like that, like that, like that, things like that, deepest things and so on, knife, and so on and so on. So you have to learn a kind of vocabulary, but what makes sense with Thierry is always use, after a moment, always the same vocabulary. So for writing music, it will be for him easier and easier, it don't change. So he developed his own vocabulary, and it makes sense. And after that, he decides, okay, it's the hand, and after that, okay, Silence Must Be, okay, and after that, I met him in 2003 for the Biennale Gram, and he knows me before, and I know for him before, but we never met before, and we never worked together. And the first thing we did is that he made draw, and we try to imagine a vocabulary just with hands, you know, and immediately we question the possibility to write it and to be well understood for he and me, and of course for the transmission of the piece. So he wrote a lot of things like that, you know, depending the places, depending the sounds he would like to do, and most of those things he draw, we don't use it, but some yes, and it's very important because this moment was absolutely an experimental thing, you know, and it was very important because it's allow us to know better each other. And for me, it was very interesting because I know better and better what he needs to do, and it was the same thing for him because it's a very interactive thing, you know. And so after that, we decide to goodbye. Yes, because silence must be in the standard language, you know. Silence means like this, must be, and you have several things related to this sign language. Okay. So now it's a score. You can you remember the music de table. It's quite the same. Okay, it tried to do the same using. Okay, and after it's very interesting if you are interested by that, because the problem with when you work for a gesture is how to write it. Dancers had Laban or Benesch and more vocabulary to write it, but it's very complex to understand, to read it. It's a minimum 2 or 3 years to learn how to read the Benesch or Laban music, you know. So it's very difficult. And with Thierry, after, you can imagine, after a lot of discussions, we decided to have one fixed position, one another one, and then a way for the interpreter to go from one point to the other. And finally, except some few very precise things, as you can see the last line, you know, everything, when you see that, for example, is a knife. So I split my hands, I make attention in specific, I will show you that after. Okay, I split, and then after I just have to have radical and very fast things into the light, but very, always in this kind of line, you know, so you can imagine whatever you want, you know. And then we realize that for the most complex, you know, so it's an articulation between very precise things. So here we have, remember the 5 of Saint-Exupéry, tikkon, ticket, ticket, tikkon, second bar, tikkon, 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 I'm here up, and then I imagine some things like that, okay, because he wrote flexible things, then fixed, then flexible, and so on and so on. And finally, after years, it's the best, one of the best way to write his music, because this piece has been played with many other musicians than me. This is a more specialized things, and look at the small square in the end of the page, because we will speak about that with the LightPulse system. So this was a piece which is absolutely well known in the world, because it's one of the most famous pieces ever written for hands, you know. And the phrase, the sentence, the main idea of Thierry is extract from Goethe. It means that you must have inside of you a chaos to make pour donner naissance, comme on dit, pour donner naissance,
Make it meaningful.
start dancing. So it means that you must have a chaos inside of you if you want to say one thing, you know. And for Thierry it was a very important phrase, okay. So and so on. So now, after years, in 2013, we did a labo in Lyon, because as Ed said, I teach in Lyon for many time now, and we decided to use the patch of light music. And after this, it was a very, very long process, because we worked 10 days in the same theater. It was amazing. At that time it was possible, now it's not more possible, but okay. And when we finished the laboratoire, we decided, Christophe Le Breton and me, to develop a new tool, very efficient, free. We can be on one computer, so with all the constraints, and we were able to create pieces or things and so on and so on, and at the same time to be a pedagogic tool. So when we came from the patch of light music, we decided to put off a lot of things, because you have many things we are very heavy for CPU and so on and so on. And we decided I decided to make a choice concerning what will be efficient for kids, for example, for dancer, student dancer, and professional. And for almost 2 years, I read a lot in different companies of dancing all over the world, and to be sure that, and each time after I make a correction of the patch, just to precise exactly what we need, what works, and so on and so on. And one of the experience was with a very primary school. The oldest kids was 10 years old, and I asked them, of course, I do with them what we will do together just after, And I said, okay, you will write for me a piece. So I need what mean a piece when you speak with very young kids, you know, what does it mean? So a title, of course, very important title, you know. The name, so the title is here, you know, it's called Human vs Robots, okay? You have the composer, okay, first name, last name, Clémence, Becker, and so on. You have the story, okay, you have the score, and you have the sound. And what is interesting, I never speak with them about how to write the score. I just let them, okay, free. What was important at that time in this school, they have a very good teacher with who they learn how to record, how to transform, and so on and so on and so on. You know, and then it was very interesting to have this kind of competition. And each time it was two kids, you know, and I have like this several composition, you know. So you have always the same form, okay. So of course the way they use the score is different. But you have the same thing, the story, the name, the audience, the composer, and the sound. And it's very important because...
That one's called Fear, right?
What?
Yeah.
It's called Fear.
Yeah, Fear, exactly. and what, for me, it was very important that, because when you speak about technology, we're all explaining technology, okay, and so on and so on and so on, but finally we lose how we can transmit it, and because it's an experience. And for me, it was very evident that at the very first time, they knew that they should, they will write it. Okay, so but you know, we are always the same style. I just stopped on this one because what is interesting is, as I told you, they are less than 10 years old, you know. And I have around the table discussions that sometimes it's difficult to have with composer because we spoke with them about contrast, duration, densification, necessity to say something, and so on and so on. So many different things that we are able that normally we speak with composer. And for this one, she's the only one she was alone. And look, it's almost the gold number. I never speak about that, you know, but you have densification, tac, here kind of climax, and got out. And I really like this because finally, when you are in a story, when you want to read a story, or when you write a story, you speak about the landscape. There is a story, so densification, something happened, climax, and then we have to leave this climax. And I never speak about that with them, and all of them understood that because it was necessary for them to do that. So now, okay, again,
How old are these students?
less than 10 years.
Less than 10 years.
Yeah, because the primary school, okay. So this is much more high level. It was student from Taipei, okay. So, but the idea is more strict because the pieces was more complex. So she write everything concerning the patch and so on, okay, with some part of music just to fix that. And okay, no, this is another one. This other one is interesting because, and we will speak about that, it's very important, because she wrote the situation she needs, you know, on stage around the vibraphone and so on, okay, with verticality, it's everything that they have to play like a reservoir, okay. And of course, each time you have a cue specific 130, 31, and so on, with the specification in the patch, and so on. But I let them do it by themselves, okay? I don't say right like this and so on and so on. So if I go fast, but if I speak about that, it's because everything sorry, I will take it now, okay? Come on. Everything. Sometimes when we work on new technology, we think that it's immediate. It's something. It's happened now. But what I like the most is the process. And now we will work. You will play in the dispositif, which is a consequence of an artistic project. I really like that. You know, Christophe Le Breton built the tool for Thierry Donnet. And now we are able to take a part of the tool to make another tool more simple, but dedicated to creation and to transmission, by the way. So So for me, it's a very important point. If you remember on the score I show you, there is no sign concerning the movement. But as I told you, you have a story each time. So it means that, for example, la peur, okay, the fear, you know. Of course, if you have a piece around the fear, all your gesture will be very short, with hesitation, very speed, and so on and so on. If you have another one, should be I have to make a walk with my brother, okay? So I walk, so it's another dimension in the movement. And even you don't write exactly what you want, you can describe a family of movement. And for kids, it's very, very important because they understood how they can recognize themselves in the story. It means that they read something, they appropriate for them for each the story, and they interpret it immediately with their intuition and with their movement. So in 2017-18, we start to work on this batch, and I will just now work with you and explain how it works and so on and so on and so on. So one of the project is to consider the stage as we say as a meeting point, not a representative point. So for me, the big difference between the 20th and 21st century is 21st century is every space could be a stage. Here, of course, outside it could be downstairs, the rear could be a stage and so on. It is very important that each, not all the time, but more and more, when we create a piece or a performance, it's always related to the space. And I think it's a very important thing. And with this kind of dispositive, the stage by itself, anyway, the place by itself is the instrument, because you don't need to have specific tools in your hands, just crossing the light and so on and so on. For this presentation, I just make some arrange with the light. We will use a light bulb, but of course, this light could be on the roof, and you can imagine a dispositive of light. You can imagine a cue list of light, of course, and the light will be will create the sound, of course, and it means that this is the most practical things, just to explain how it works and so on and so on. So it's small room, so we have a small playground here, you know. So here you will see in the camera in the screen in front of me, you have sound, okay, everything makes sound until here. So of course, if I'm here, there is no more sound, but it doesn't mean that it's not interesting, okay? Because if I'm here, I can be present too, you know. I could be present without sound, okay? So it's very interesting to imagine a piece where you instead of working sound first or score, you make a draw of a stage, and you don't speak to interpreters or performers, you speak to incarnations. What I'm able to express when I do that, and so on and so on. I just would like, it was not anticipated, but maybe I would like to play for you the piece Silence Must Be, and I need your help. Yes. Could you, and along, Andrew, come on. Because you know that piece, I imagine, okay? Okay? So, you know this piece?
No.
Okay, so, okay. But I think it's interesting because it will be easier for me to express what I would like to say after. I will do once this,
Yes.
1 second, and the third, and I stop here.
Yes.
And for the third time, you play the space bar here. Okay?
Yes.
Okay?
Yes.
And you let it. Okay?
Cool. Yeah, makes sense.
But you have time before I play in the silence. So, okay. Speak after. this piece is very important because finally everything concerning what we will speak now is inside this kind of piece, because you have nothing. The tape is just uninteresting, okay, a sound clean contact, okay, but even it's always the same sound, the file is exactly the same. When you play it, when you are on stage, you don't hear the same thing, and because it's a moment, so you can work on different sound and so on and so on. If you are not able to create a moment, the sound definitely doesn't sound. I mean that, for example, when you listen to music at home, you know, you are home, so you are kind of disponible to listen to the music and so on and so on, and depending your feeling, it sounds differently. You know that, everybody knows that, and it's very interesting when you're on stage that it's maybe crazy, but I'm absolutely sure that if I stop, the tape stops. Of course not. But you know, you have to. It's very important. I've been timpanist for many years in orchestra, and for me, it's impossible to imagine movement without sound. Just it's not because I immediately stop to breathe, so I'm suspended. You know, and it's very important for a composer to imagine that the interpreter, because as you understood, I'm an interpreter. It's very important to understand that the position, the body, even it's through an interface or an instrument, and in its evolvement, above all, the score is important. Of course, the score is a base, okay? So it should be able to play the piece, but it's not enough. And because if just playing the piece, you can record it, it's okay. You know, if you want to make something happen, it means that you require from the interpreter another dimension. You require something different, and it's very important to touch that with the interpreter. You know, and when we did this kind of work, we decide. For me, it was very important to decide. Now, what we will do now is to be here and now. I just say a few things we said later. Just very shortly. You have to favor when you see, okay, here and now. If we are just here, we are just in representation. So as interpreter, I repeat what I know very well. So my virtuosity, my knowledge, and so on. If I'm just now, I don't go on stage, because when you see what's happening in the world, you know, what does it mean to be on stage? Okay, so it's always an average between, and it's very interesting that when you play your instrument, you can hide yourself behind virtuosity, behind a lot of things. You can hide yourself because it's the tradition, schools, and you know how to do, and so on and so on. But when you speak about gesture, especially here, if you don't believe in, nothing happens. And for me, it's a kind of magic mirror. You are obliged to be present. If not, it doesn't work. That's why when I have some project, or I still have several projects with dance company and so on and so on, if I don't see the participants, I can't imagine a project. On the contrary, when I do master classes of Persian and so on and so on, I'm able to imagine, not exactly, but almost what will happen, because the repertoire is well known, we know the piece, we know a lot of things, you know. It means that you can imagine a frame in which you will speak and so on and so on. But for that, it's not possible. And what I like the most is, for me, the place of the maïeutique. Maïeutique, Socrate, you know, Socratian, Socrate. Maïeutique means Socrate, antique Greece philosopher. Socrates says at that time that we are unable to teach something to someone. I mean, fundamental things, you know, not just how to turn a button. Of course, you have to learn that, but it's not possible to change someone who is not a musician to be a musician. But what you are able to do is to reveal it, to make it sensible, curious, and above all, with a lot of tools. And finally, the person in front of you say, okay, yes, I can do that. Okay, I didn't know, but I'm able to do it. And here, because there is no tradition, no school, no exercise, no method, nothing. It's a place of a kind of maiotic. It's not the only place we have this kind of transmission moment, but this is a very good thing to do that. So now, guys and girls, you will be the player. You have to play inside it. Okay. I think when we work with new technology, and you are a good place for that, you have the research moment, exploration, and so on, so on. And then for the interpreter, what the most important moment is to be able to control it and to repeat with, and I had the chance with live music to work 6 years on the piece, and we did 3 versions. We re-record all the sounds, and we make a movie with Thierry, because Thierry is above all filmmaker about dance. And because we spent all this time, we simplify a lot of things, because at the very beginning we had 3 computers with 3 technicians. Now everything is in one, so a lot of, and I have sensor for different things. Now I have just 2 sensors, and I control the light, everything. So I absolutely free to choose my interpretation. And what is important is in this process I understood something that the time you spend, you feel you lose time, but finally not. Each step, even if it don't work, you grow up with, especially when it don't work, because you are obliged to look for what is it work, and this so this patch is made in 2 parts. You have a video one. I will show you after, because after, if you have your mic, I can review it on yours. You have a video patch you can use for many other projects, and you have a patch very classical with players, with a game player, which means that several possibilities and action concerning the movement. You have a lot of filters and so on and so on, and you can, of course, with a cue list and so on, but you know that very well, and different tools will help you to be more actor of what you do, not just space bar all the time. Okay, so now we will try. So as you understood, oh, thank you very much. Thank you. As you understood, so this is our wonderful playground. Okay, and we will start with one of the options is total motion. So it means that if you want to do sounds, you have to move. But if you stay in the light, the camera don't see you, and the sound stop, and then you can do something. And related to the sound, of course, and by the way, that's the point where we can speak about interpretation, because depending on the way you listen, you have to be very here. I mean, you close your eyes and you forget everybody, and just okay. And by the way, it's probably the most, for me, a very good tool to be near our first intuition in sound. If you are a composer, it's because you like sound, you like movement, you like landscape. I don't know, but you are very near this question. And finally, it's very important for me. I imagine I'm not a composer, but to be always to have a relation with. Of course, you can be interpreter, you can play your instrument and so on. But here, I've spent a big part of my life to work and to practice my instruments, and I never be in the same place than here. I mean, of course you can play intuitively on some and so on, you can improvise and so on, yes, but you always have the frame of your instrument. Here, your instrument is just you wish. You see what I mean? So you are absolutely free. So you can move intuitively and so on and so on. And by the way, it's a school for to have to be more curious with it here. To understand what's happened and so on. You move more, less, you wait, and you rest. And with one sound, you can make a piece. You don't need to have. We'll see a lot of things you can do with. But it's very, very, very important to me, and especially to wait for the silence. The silence in music is like a point after a phrase. If I'm still writing, there is no sense. The sense is when I stop writing, and the sound is the same. The sound when you stop. If you always do a kind of helicopter, okay, I can put a tape. It's the same. There is no interest. If I stop, intuitively I don't know why, and I breath, and then I I go back and so on and so on and so on and so on. Okay? So this is just motion. Okay? So welcome. Okay? Can I come and have yes, it was not a question. Okay? So the playground is here. Okay? So look your hand. You can see the shadow here. Okay? So of course, if you move here, nothing happen. It must be in the light. Okay? Okay? Okay?
Yeah.
Yes, yes. Now with the sound, okay? And of course, we put this incredible monitor. I never seen that. It's big. But it's just for a specific exercise we will do later. But try to be. You are here, okay? If you do that, it sounds. So just close your eyes and just listen to what's happened, okay? So the first sound is a long one with a big release, okay, and a very long attack. So normally it should work. No, you are not in the light. Right? Okay, put your yes. And of course, more you move fast, more it will be loud because. So you are not in the light. Look your hand. Okay. I will do it bigger. Because it's too small for me.
Don't burn yourself.
Yeah. Oh, it's too much. Yes, okay. And I guess you have a left hand too. Yes, because okay. Normally, we use two light zoom profile from right and left. Here is too small and so on and so on. But here, so you're totally understood. Now, what is interesting is to, of course, you stay here, you suspend it, and don't maybe do that. You will be the sound will be bigger. It's a real instrument because everything comes from you. I mean, okay. Oh, wait, see, it's got it. Okay, and it. So here because it's very small and clear hole, so I have a threshold and I put the threshold very high. So that's why sometimes it's okay, very not on off, but you can imagine. And of course you are knee too, so you can move. Okay. So this is the first thing. Okay, the first. Now we can stop. Okay. Now another things, and I will show you in the batch at the end, okay? Okay, we have another sounds, okay, but I cut totally the attack, I cut totally the release, so, okay, come on. So it's very short now. So the idea is to have the most simple and precise movement. So it's just to try that. If you put one finger, it will raise it. Of course. Okay. Look, it's interesting because when you do that, the camera just say one point. If you do that, it's more efficient. So. Okay, this way it's more important that if you do that, it doesn't work. it's a complete file. I would like to say to speak about that. The file I put in the batch, it's totally it's the sound there all the time. It starts like that, no fade in, no fade out. Okay, because it's an of course you can do it, but it's composition. Here is just exercise just to show you. I prepare that just to show you, but it's very important that the sound is always almost the same volume, you know. And inside it, you can move. You can decide when you want more or less, you know. If you have a form in your file, okay, you have to consider that it's already written. So you have to take care about where you are in the file and so on and so on. Okay. So this is so two first example. The third one is a sum. So until now, just movement makes sound, okay? And more you move and so on, more it makes sound. Now, it
So
just
now, did you say it's a sound file that has a certain length?
no, because it could be very short. I make loop. It's a loop, okay? So we work on a motion here, okay? And now it's another possibility is sum. It's accumulation of pixels. So okay, so this, no, it's so here, okay. I just put my hand, okay. I put two hands. It's lighter. It will be more loud. And now I can imagine I leave very slowly. Yes. Now again. Okay. Not so bad. So it means that you can work on the presence. Presence. It's okay. Okay. And it's very interesting because, of course, everything we already did now could be in reverse. I mean, I can imagine that we have a sound, and when I go in, it stops the sound. So dramatically, it's very interesting, okay? Because imagine you have sound, okay, and then I will try to do it right now. So I do the same. Where is it? We'll see it here. So we have normally. So it's always I never okay. We try so we have sound and normally when it goes in it stops. Okay, it works. Of course. So it's a very very interesting sound, okay? But what I mean is if you want to make a very strong event on stage, you very rare and you stop it and you keep it. And of course after you change something in, but because if you leave it's again. If you try to do it with motion, it's a disaster. Or you are very young, so it's okay. But because so I'm sure you do it. That motion. Okay. So here it means that I have to try to put it off. Okay. So you have to move a lot. You have to move a lot. Again, until the silence. Not possible. Okay. No, what I do that because it's everything I try to imagine is the way to be to push the performer to be absolutely involved in what he did, not through a technique or virtuosity, but just the way he feels the things. And for example, this kind of event when we are in. When we stop the sound, I did one show with a barrel flutist on the medieval poem from Guillaume de Machaut, and nothing on stage, just light from the roof and so on and so on. And after a moment, because there was a kind of nightmare chamber in the light, and everything stopped at that time. And of course, we can imagine that I program it or I play spacebar, but it's totally different if the guy or the girl on stage do it, because the time, the way she used to do it and so on is definitely different, you know. Of course, you can make a fake things, okay, but here it's a real thing. It's very, very interesting. So here we were in simple sound and so on and so on. So now, what is very interesting in when we work on something much more rhythmical. More it will be clear, more the tape will be, written, okay, more your place will be very important. So I just make playing one thing very. I just have to know where is it. Okay. Book say. So what is interesting with this? It's just a very simple thing, you know. Just for you to see what's happening. Okay. So it means that I can imagine. Of course, you have to, because it's always always the same. Okay. So I don't stop. I just make a fader on. I have to change the fader because it's too much sensitive. There is too many like here. So it means that when you will listen to it, so you can read we can imagine a very, so it depends on what. This example is very simple, but it's a good way to think that you can write a piece like that, and you can construct or deconstruct the piece itself. I mean the rhythm. Okay, if you know it very well, and at that time you can imagine different organization of vocabulary with your hand or with the body, your head or whatever you want. Okay, this is very interesting. So yes. So now another thing for me, which is very important, is what you can express with your hands. Because I start with Thierry, of course, so I will be very interested by. And often, most of the time, we are working or thinking about the movement of the body, arms, and so on and so on and so on. And sometimes we lose hands. And I just make this kind of things. Look, I will show you that. I absolutely don't know the language, the sign language, as we spoke for Thierry music. But you can imagine a talk, you know, and someone, Andrew, come on, okay, and so just.
You don't understand.
Okay. So just first listen to it, okay? Listen to it.
So you have
Okay.
your own command. Intelligence fills the world with its passion.
Okay.
Which yet survive. Stamped on these lifeless things.
Okay. Very good. So now you look in front of you, and you make a talk. You say, okay, good morning, and so on and so on.
My name.
So when you speak, you say hello.
Oh, you want me
Are
to tell you what to
okay?
say, like vocalized action?
No,
Yes.
no.
With my, I was trying to make the thing speak.
No.
Okay. So, yeah, what I was saying, I'd say,
Okay.
okay, don't use your hands and start talking
No,
and
no,
make a speech, is that what you want?
Do it with your hand.
Do it with my hands.
Yes.
Okay.
So you say the same thing, but hello.
So, I see. So articulate the sound of my voice with my hands.
Yes, but not your voice. The voice is recorded. But it must be
Okay.
a phrase. It must be exactly with silence, with punctuation. And if it would be more important, more movement, okay? Stop. And then you speak. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
So what I would like to say is, with this kind of very simple dispositif, depending what you put inside the patch, you can have so many possibilities. You see what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So it's very important to always be in contact with something you want to say, and so on and so on and so on. If we are here, okay, it's just dancing, sing, and so on and so on.
And it's interesting because this implies a sort of a style because of the cadence of my speech is tends to be somewhat punctuated.
Yeah.
Because I think I've worked with computers too long, so I don't speak more fluidly than some people.
Try singing the national anthem.
Intelligence fills the world with its passion, which yet survive. Stamped on these lifeless things, the hand that mocked the head of the heart.
So it's more fluid.
No. Try. You know, when I spoke about silence at the very beginning, we're here. You know, we are okay. I need to understand what you want to say. Please. Look. Sorry.
Round the
Okay.
decay.
You want to say something, so you look the person first, okay? And
Level settings. Stretch from
you see what I mean? You have to always be in this kind of direction. So it needs a lot of energy. Okay, you speak very, you say, I know exactly what I want to say, you know. So you are okay, always saying it. And what is very interesting is if you lose something or if you okay, it doesn't work, you know. So that's I like very much this kind of thing.
I've stamped on these
Look
lines.
here.
The hand that mocked the summer that fed on and on the pedestal these words appear. My name is Mendes King. Look on my work, mighty and despair. The Algiers, nothing else beside remain. Merely round the decay, colossal, yet boundless. Alone at level settings, stretch far away.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Cool.
Okay.
Very good. Well, yeah,
Yes,
nice.
very
Very
well.
nice.
So now we will work. Now it was just total motion for the whole screen, okay? And now we will go deeper in the system. So as you have seen, you have 4 regions on the monitor here, and we could divide 1, 2, 3, 4, or 2, 4, 1, 3, and so on, or 1, 2, 3, 4. It means that you can also divide in the motion or sum. So it's very interesting. So for example, I just would like to test this one. 31.
And do you get like control also from top to bottom? No,
No.
it's just brightness, luminosity.
Exactly.
to the- yeah.
No. Always we try that. You know, when we start to do it, we have 10 recorders, 10 records, possibility of records, of 10 minutes each. Because I would like to develop the sum by region, we are obliged to put it off because it's too much for CPU and so on and so on. So
Yeah.
it's always an average between what we want to do and what we can do.
Yeah.
You know. So here I have. Okay, normally we should have two things. So here, nothing. Okay, I just do that probably. Yeah. So here, okay, motion. And here, just presence. So it means I can play alone, I can play 2 with 2 and so on and so on. So here is just presence. More and more. And I don't know. So here I have the control of the sound because I can stop in the light. Here is just the presence. Okay. So here it's 1, 2, 1, 3 to 4. Okay. And of course I can have. We will see 4 different sounds and so on because I just have to write for the player 1 sound, player 2, player 3, player 4. I will show you after. Okay. It's clear for you, okay? Okay, so sums, we know that. Come on, okay, and okay, so someone would like to do something with? No. Good. Yes. That's fun. Who else? Yeah. Somebody. Another one. Will like. Okay. I will play this one. Remember the rhythmical thing I play before. Boom boom. Okay. Okay. Now you have boss. You have one stretch and one normal. I guess. Okay. one thing. Okay. Okay, someone will play that. So you have the stretch one right and normal one left. You remember? Here is motion. Here is
Motion. and
motion.
what?
Motion right. Here.
And this is nothing but yeah. Okay.
One motion.
Yeah. I just need to think about it for a second. Well, this is very hard. Yeah.
Yeah.
The threshold for this one is very high, so it's hard to think about the two at the same time. I could stay here for hours.
Okay, now I just show you with the fourth different region. So we will be 303. So just to check for you, so we'll have four. No, not four as well. 3, 4. So it should be 4 sounds. So here, so you can divide in 4 sounds. So here. And here we have so and what is interesting, so we can work, so you can imagine different things. Okay, I did the same thing with a top shot camera. So I put instead of putting it in front of me, I put it on the floor. The problem is you have to yes, because I'm okay, I know why. The problem is you have to put a black carpet on the floor. Because if not, the camera see a lot of light. Okay, but it's very efficient. So it depends, of course, the distance with the roof, of course. But it's very interesting because you don't need. You just have to have a floor pattern on stage with tape, and you can imagine. You can have something very precise. Okay, so it means that you can imagine 4 regions, and then you are able to change it. I will show you that. So here, wait a minute. Okay, we'll do that after. So now I will show you everything. You can change with the green zone. You tree it, and you can change everything. So you are absolutely independent. You don't need a space bar player. So I just would like to show you that. Okay, which is 500. This is very interesting, but it's another constraint because, and you will see why. So, I'm excused. Okay. So here I will start here. So look at the screen here. So when I will start, so I decide that when the performer going in the line, he starts the file. Okay. So here I start the file. When I start the file, I have a green zone here. You see what I mean? So I can develop my things and so on and so on. Okay, wonderful. And here. So I can imagine different movement or something, and of course I can put it where I want. Here, if I go here, and then the last one would be this one. It would be something, and so on and so on. So it means that you have 109 possibilities of green zone. So it means that you are able to control absolutely the process of the piece. The constraint is you are obliged to see the screen. So it's very important to, if we feel I need a piece for a space with a lot of things dedicated to audience and so on and so on. If you have someone looking at score, it works not so well. It's very it could be very full. And I wrote a small exercise with 4 chairs, and 4 people are here behind.
Have you worked at all like with, speaking of top-down shots, like can you make the green zone bigger so you could have a dancer that would be dancing in one area and then move to another zone?
I can't change the but what I can put a marker here. I'm sure it's changed. And what I would like to say, it's very efficient if, for example, you have I wrote this file. It's not a piece, but an exercise with 4 chairs. And when you are sure to be here, so you fix on the floor, you know where are the green zone. So you don't need to have, So it's very important that it's always an average between the constraints and the possibilities. And that we learn a lot with the kids. I show you the scores because at the very beginning they would like to be, of course, free. So now I decide I will do by myself and so on and so on. And finally, they recognize that for some parts of their piece, it was too difficult to always to see the screen, So they prefer to have spacebar player. And then sometimes they say, okay, this is a very specific movement. I will do it by myself with the green zone. So this is very interesting. Another thing I would like to show you is live recording. So we can also let me check where I am. It's clear for you, of course. Okay. Okay. If you have question, please don't hesitate.
Who was your technical? Were you going to tell a little bit about the?
Yes, I will show you after. I just finished the run thing. Okay. So here, for example, it works. Does it work? Hello. Okay, it works together. So here I have a cue and I record while I say. It's not very interesting, but anyway I would like to speak, and then if I play a record, I should have the same thing. Yeah. To speak. I say it's not very interesting. Anyway I would like to speak. Okay. So it means that it's not very interesting, but anyway I okay. To speak. So it means that if you play with an instrument, you can have someone playing here, okay, and a dancer or another performer playing the movement of what you already did. It's possible to do it in live. Attends, I have to. Sorry, I have to do things. Okay, let me see. Sorry, I made a mistake. Okay. going. I will do it again. Okay. So this is that. Okay. Come on. So. Okay. Okay. So wait. Let's run please. Now. What is actually do it? Okay, so now I just would like to do it record. It's not fun. Okay. And I will explain why I had a problem here. So so I record something ta 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 ta, and now it should be transformed normally. Because I had it an harmonizer very simple. Okay. So now we can do it in live with a big input file. For example, if I do record, that's the big inputs. It's 6. Okay. For example, so someone could Andrew, okay, could you speak? Could you say something? And someone else go in the light and change. Sorry.
You already got this, right?
It's
Whatever
not.
that-
Yeah.
Don't count on them.
Well, volume now. Yeah, right, yeah, yeah, the analog volume.
Okay, anyway, let me check.
Your turn.
Sorry, Total Mix was okay, of course. Could you speak?
It was a cool sound though. What was up with that voice? Yeah.
Yeah.
This is Adam walking to the stage. That's amazing that it's first solo.
I don't know. Wait a minute. Just check because
You're checking the
attends, je mets tout à zéro. Attends. Okay, vas-y, stick with it. Okay, so it should be. What does it mean? Why does it mean so? How do you do it? No, it's okay. So, could you speak something?
Yes, I can say something. This is talking to a microphone. And
Okay,
this is
and now someone is live?
Hi,
What's the direction?
this is Adam walking into the microphone and talking and saying something. I believe you're probably getting input from that microphone, not this microphone. That's what I think is happening.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah.
So anyway, so I
You're
will
talking-
speak, and when you will change normally, yes, you listen for something? See, you understand?
No.
Yes.
Yeah,
Just check here.
try moving left and right.
Oh.
There we go. That's
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, cool work now.
This is a test. Test. Yes,
Okay.
that's good. Ah, now Eda, you have to move, I think, to make this.
That's if I move.
It might help if you took your
No,
coat off.
I think
Hmm?
this is
It might help if you took your
You're
coat off
fine.
because you're wearing a lot of
Turn the
dark
volume
colors.
down.
No, but it's
Yeah, you should be good.
I think it's good. It's not bad.
Well, there's the camera's there.
But that's the reason, right? That we're not
Is it
just
to me?
But it's still my movement. So
Yeah. Here I am.
Okay.
So, this is me talking, and I was walking through
moving, I just change that. Could you again?
Yeah.
No, it didn't work. It didn't work. Sorry, I'm back here.
We're getting close.
Yeah.
Not one.
That's why I don't use this patch.
Okay.
So could you say something all the time?
Yes,
Every
this
time?
is, I'm just gonna keep talking about it. One time I was talking and then.
Louder, louder, please, louder, louder.
And then,
louder.
Eda was, looking over here, then
Okay,
she started moving
now
her
stop.
arms.
Could you move in?
Left.
Picture? Ah, okay. He was very. Okay, let's check it out. Okay. Could you again? Not. No. Why? I don't know why it's not working.
Oh.
Let's see.
I hear myself. And then,
Okay. Yeah, because
So maybe
I changed
try
the
one
dimensions.
more
Okay.
or something? No?
So it means that you you can transform. But imagine a musician playing flutes on with more.
yeah.
Okay, you enter in the light, and you can imagine on the stage different position for the light. So you can cross light and so on and so on and so on. And the intensity of the light, if you use sun, for example, of course we start to do.
Do I keep talking?
Yes.
Something.
Just,
So I'm gonna keep talking and say something to this microphone and.
louder.
Yes, and then I'm going to use my speaking voice to read something into
Okay.
this mic,
Could you,
and
could you try?
we're going to see if Eda can.
Don't move because I
Yes,
change.
and
I have to
I'm
change.
going to use my speaking voice.
Because it's sun, you don't have to move.
Oh.
You leave. Okay, right, go in.
Yes, and I'm going to use my speaking voice.
Okay. You must stay in the light. If you
Yes, and I'm going to use my speaking
Oh.
voice.
okay, you see what I mean? You okay. So it means that with just two proposition, motion or sun, you can imagine a lot of perspective and superposition. So now I will show you the things I will give you now. So this, of course, you understood that you have many different possibilities to develop, and the constraints of this tool is the technical one. You know, it must be in one because you have, as I told you, I will show you two patches and so on, and it must turn on just Macintosh, just OS, no PC. Okay, so it's very important. And the only things you have to buy is expensive is a computer because you need just a webcam. It's very cheap. A stereo, you are not obliged to use Sony card or so on. And what is very efficient is the camera see you in the light, but if you want to work on it at home, you take your smartphone and you look for the camera. So it's the opposite way, but it will be the same thing. Of course, as you have seen now, depending the hole you play, white or black hole, the space and so on, you always be obliged to control everything and to adapt, of course. And that's the things which is sometimes difficult. Okay, so everything I just put. Okay, I put everything. So now I will show you the patchy set. No, it's I put it off. So you have to download Visual Code. You know Visual Code? Okay, so if you are already, it's perfect.
Wait, what was that?
Visual Code. Visual Code is you can download it.
VS Code?
To have the cue list. Alors, I will show you that software. Okay. So it's an app, and that's why when I will give you, you are obliged to go to in the terminal of your computer to have the good line for your computer. So it's you don't need to have you you have all this. Okay, so this is the patch. Is this enough clear or? I'm not sure. Vous me sentez bien là? Non, c'est flou. Hein? Attends. Just maybe it's not. Maybe it's me because of the.
Yes.
here you have, we'll start with the player, okay? So the player here, okay? Okay, so you have 6 players and each you can divide in 2 with, for example, level entrance, okay? 0, or you can move, of course. Fade in, fade out, so fading when you put it, the sound file here, fade in. The log, you have 3 attack, log, expo, and linear, okay? 3 very main things. Loop or not, okay? So, and each time you have to validate and save and so on and so on, okay? So here you put all the file you want, and here you have everything concerning, I will show you, concerning the, it will be better like that. Yes, okay. So here you have, when I say log, linear, expo, log, okay, it's very important because sometimes you just have to change the curve, and you don't have to you don't need to have to use the volume, okay, because it depends on the interpreter, okay. Exactly, I made a piece with saxophone soprano with just multiphonic, and when the entrance, when she go inside the light, imagine the saxophone, you know, with very lightly sings, you know. I was obliged to make a little very important threshold to have security, you know, and it was very important to use linear things, just to have a control of the very beginning and so on and so on. So it really depends on what you want to do. So here, of course, after you validate and so on, okay, here you have where and move. So total motion is here, okay, and you have total motion for region 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, or 1, 3 to 4. Exactly what we did here, okay. Here you have awesome, so it's other things, and we have 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's most difficult because the sum must be realized with the guy inside the light. Here, before I make a kind of average, okay, just to be able to play and so on and so on. But if you want something very precise, very sensitive, you must take a photo of the guy. So you put the interpreter in the light, and you click here. For example, if I want to work on awesome, I ask the performer to go in the light, then I record, and then I send. So it will be absolutely precise for the quantity of the person in the light. And then I have a threshold depending the hole and depending the size of the hole and so on and so on and so on. So here we have everything concerning the game, okay, game players, okay, and you have for each here different attack. So you have 4 log and 4 expo and 1 linear. So it's very important because it's have a big influence of on the quality of the movement and on the sound, of course. And you have so normal inverse, as I told you, okay, normal or inverse system. And here you have attack release. So it means that you can imagine the same sound. If you have, for example, 200 attack and 500 release, it's like a wave, you know. If you do 0, 0, it's like something very strict and so on and so on. So you can make some differences. It's very, very interesting. So here the sum. So you must, as I told you, you must set it each time depending the performer. Okay. For example, Andrew is in white. Of course, the camera will see a lot of information. And in black, it will be less information. So it depends on the way you are dressed and so on and so on. So this is for the sum. Another thing very important is that I don't speak about that first. Is the position of the place you want to give or not to the performer. Here is next to total motion. It means that you open a window, and when the performer go inside the light, he will decide at the very beginning of the file. So he decides. So when it's a map or something very floating and suspended, it's not always necessary, but when it's something rhythmical and you need a really good attack, it's very important to have this. So you open it, and each time you have a cue list, and you open it, and you decide, okay, I open the window here, and next to you I close the window. Of course, you are obliged to open and close all information anyway. Okay, so here you put all your yes, there is just a record here, but you have to put your file. And when you have your lips on file, you drag and drop here. So it's very easy to and then depending what you want to do, you try to find a cue list. So I'm not sure. if I have a cue list here. Yes, I have a cue list. I will show you the video, the visual cue list here. Visual code. Okay. Okay. So and here for me this is a score. That's why I'm performer. I'm not very okay. Not very knowledge in computer systems and so on. And for me, it's exactly my score. I know that Q100. It's in the title, so don't care. Here I have. Oh, sorry. Here I have 101 on next queue, so I open the window. So when I will play here, and you will see. Okay, so here I'm. Okay, so the title is Zero Abyss. Okay. So okay, 100, and when look the here it's open. Okay, it means that when I go in the light, I will start the file, and then it's over, and so on and so on. And here you have all the score. And this is very important. When I will give you, it's very important that you save it in a separate file, and then you use it, and you can transform it as you like. It's very important for me, because I work a lot on it, to have always the original one. So you can try to change different things just to be able to see exactly what is changing in the patch, and in the sound, and the perception of the sound. So here is for the total motion, and here, remember, it's a green zone. So here you can decide, for example, you can move it here, and you will see the green zone. So now I will show you the most important thing, which is the video. Okay. So the art of light world system is that, is this one. So it's a separate patch. As I told you, I missed two things. Sorry. Okay. So I show you because it's important too. Performer and projection. Okay. So now here you have all the patch of the video. So this is the heart of light world. You just have to click here. You choose your camera, okay? So we'll take this one, for example, and I see you see here what the camera see, okay? And here you have the screen for the performer. So I will send to the score the screen here, and the other one is eventually if you need a video projection, you can put it on a VP, okay? The video projection is very interesting when you work with, for example, I did several projects. One was with one dancer here, and one dancer in the back, seated on a chair, and back to the audience, and the dancer dance with the ghost, the movement of the dancer in the front. See what I mean? So it's make a real counterpoint. It could be also something very interesting if it's kind of calligraphy things. Exactly what we work with Thierry Lemay. But if not, if it's just a resonance or an echo of what's happened on stage, forget it. Because everyone will see the screen, and the most important thing happened on stage, not on the screen. So it's always an average. You can imagine, of course, specific pieces just in live, and other with the screen, and so on and so on. Another thing you can do is, you remember when I open this patch, you can choose the camera. So it means that if you have two cameras, you can switch with one here and one here, okay? The problem is the problem of connecting, but you can imagine if you have time between, you can, if you have already two, you can imagine one piece with the face camera and one other one on the top. So here you have a very efficient tool, and it works. It never crash. It's very. That's why you don't have harmonizer here, because the one I use for the presentation with harmonizer, you listen to it when you make a live microphone, because it's a lot of CPU and sometimes it's scratched, so it's not efficient. This one is very efficient and it works. So of course, you can add some other tools or the machine behind to work on the sound and to transform it, and they're much better than me, So now to present how to put it in your computer, it's almost simple. So you go. I just put it on, so you will see everything. It will be easier. So. It's this one. So installation. So you should record that. So the very beginning with the space here. Okay. So from here to here. Okay. And you put it in your terminal. Okay. And then you drag and drop this. You drag and drop this directly behind on your terminal window, and then enter. So it means that you have your own application in your own computer, and now it's open to you, because you don't need to do it for the video, and if you just have to download Visual Code, and it's already connected. So you have all the tools to work. And the first step, if you are interested by, is to see how it works already, and then you change, and so on and so on and so on. Do you have questions, or everything is clear?
It's very clear, and it's cool to think about, I think, how choreography could be included into the real-time processing of sound.
Yeah. I think it's the first step. Of course, it's very simple finally patch, it's not very complex. But if you are, for example, if you want to work with kids or pedagogical things and so on, or young ballets of dancer and so on and so on, you need to have, because the performers have to know how it works, if not, a violinist knows that he must do this kind of movement if you want to create sound. And he knows why, because vibration of the string and so on and so on. And of course, more he knows about his violin, more he is able to create, to imagine things in this position and the way he plays and so on and so on. It's exactly the same with electronic. Of course, we can't know everything, because me, I don't know everything. But I know the minimum to understand what's happened if I do that, and why it's worked like this or not. So it's very, very important. That's why this I really would like that this patch will be very simple as it can be. Just because when I work with the very young kids or the project, I explain everything. And for me, it's very important that they understand that why it worked like that, and what I changed, especially here. Especially here when I want to transform the sensibility and so on and so on. It's very important that they know what's happened behind, and immediately their gesture, the movement is definitely different. Now with LizzieLog, which is the structure with who I work, Christophe developed a lot of things. I played 2 years ago the Carino Lapis, you remember, with 2 smartphones. It's because he used we are not for the artificial intelligence, but for human intelligence. So we use old smartphone and so on and so on, and use it as camera, rotation things, gravity things, and so on and so on. So we are able to, not me, but he is able to work a lot in museum and so on and so on, just using different smartphones just to create 3D dimensions, capture, gesture, and so on and so on. The next step of this is a multidimensional, it's interactive motion sound system. So it works also with 2 cameras, but together with each have his own computer. Then both information go inside always one computer, and you can make mapping of sound in 3 dimensions. So it's, for example, you see the stage, and you can say, okay, here it must be this sound, here this sound, and so on and so on. The idea is of this tool is, of course, creation process, because here you can have very simple things, simple effect. You can see it on stage because you have the light and so on and so on. With the MSS, you're not obliged to use lights, you know, because you have your all patterns, you know exactly where it's on and so on and so on. So it must be done with a choreographer or with a performer and so on and so on. So it's a very creation process, and it works very well because we find the same flexibility, and above all, it's the most important, especially when you work with in collective things. Everyone is giving ideas and so on and so on. You must be able to make the traduction of their wish inside the patch. So it's very important that it's not too big and too complex tools, just to be more in reaction with what needs the performers and so on and so on and so on. So here we have, I forget that the recorder, they are here, okay? Okay. So you have three instead of 10, and you can record 5 minutes, so it's quite long already. No? Okay. And then you have everything you know for the refresh list, okay, edit list. Here it's everything concerning the screens. So this is the video projector, and it's the performer screen. Okay. Here you have the filters, threshold, different threshold depending on the camera, motion, and active region. Okay, for 5. Okay. So you see here, because we are in a very luminous room, we are obliged to make a very big threshold. So it's too much. Normally it's 10, you know. 10 is enough, because more it's high, less you have sensibility. Yes, of course. Thanks, Andrew.
Yeah.
Okay, so then here is audio setup, you know, everything. Okay, cool. And of course, you can use it for other things. You are not able to. You can use it for specific things you need for if you need some camera or capture. Okay, it's always you can use for yourself. Of course. The only thing we try to ask, because we give it for free, is just where you have a performance or something important, just let us know that you're using it and so on and so on. And of course, if you have new ideas, you're welcome to share with us the progress and so on and so on and so on.
Has it been used mostly by like musicians performing with it, or mostly like dancers?
Yeah, you know, more and more, because behind this project for me is questioning the place of the interpreter today, the performer today. Because, of course, I have a very classical cursus, you know, timpanist and so on and so on. But I see during all these years that there is a big evolution, not about the aesthetic and so on and so on, but the place of the performer. Because nowadays, the performance is more and more needed just playing very well, but not just playing very well. So, for example, we see more and more performances and especially interactive installation. You know, as a composer, that's why I say to it's not my student, but the students in the